The grass shivers. Dust tastes like thunder. A low rumble slides across a golden plain. One sound, two choices, hunter or hunted. Welcome to East Africa's wild heart, from Uganda's mist-draped forests to sunlit savannas and the winding White Nile. Hippos bake like boulders, crocodiles idle like loaded springs, elephants redraw dusty paths, and lions, the artists of pressure and patience, test the nerve of everything that moves. This is not just about violence. It is about timing, teamwork, and instinct. We will watch lionesses ghost through tall grass, prides snap shut like traps, and buffalo lines bend, break, and charge back with thunder in their horns. Riverbank gambles, night raids, split-second choices that decide who eats and who becomes a lesson. Tell us where you are watching from. Drop your city and country in the comments. We love to see how far the Savannah's story travels. Here, every footprint is a decision, and every echo carries a consequence. Ready, the light dips, the wind stills, and the first hunt gathers. Lionesses low, cubs hushed, a pride about to write its next fierce chapter. When the river opens like a giant pink cave, that is not a yawn, it is a warning. In Uganda's calm waters, the hippopotamus turns quiet afternoons into some of the savanna's most savage standoffs. Meet the hippopotamus of Uganda's White Nile and Mirror Flat lakes, a barrel-built heavyweight that rules the water by attitude and architecture. Stock still by day, grass mower by night, its defining trait is territorial power, backed by a jaw that could park a soccer ball. Painted in slate gray with blush pink highlights, the hippo looks stone-carved, then suddenly moves like a torpedo. Eyes, ears, and nostrils sit high on the skull, periscopes that keep watch while the rest of the body lies submerged. Nostrils seal, ears fold, and the hippo simply sinks, walking the riverbed in buoyant gallops. Its skin, thick but sun-sensitive, sweats a natural sunscreen, a reddish blood sweat that doubles as antibacterial armor. Short pillar legs end in splayed toes that grip mud. Dense bones act like ballast. The mouth is evolution's jawbreaker, a 150-degree gape bristling with overgrown canines and incisors, sharpened by constant grinding. Despite the bulk, speed is a party trick. On land, a hippo can burst past 30 kilometers per hour, and in water, it surges with frightening acceleration, especially over short distances. Everything about this build says river monarch, from the stubby tail used to spray sling scent to the scars that read like a history of close calls. By day, hippos stack together in pods, also called colonies, like living boulders, skin cooling underwater that shields them from the punishing equatorial sun. The surface is an amphitheater of wheeze honks, bubble grunts, and ripples. Hello, excuse me, back off. Late light flips the switch. With dusk, they file up well-worn hippo highways, trekking kilometers to mow night lawns. A single adult can chomp through up to 40 kilograms of grass before sunrise, then ghost back to the river's edge by first light. Territoriality shapes every hour. Bulls carve watery fiefdoms, fanning dung with that stubby tail like a paintbrush. This stretch is mine. A gape is not a yawn, but an audition for fear. If that fails, the charge is a battering ram with tusks. Conflicts over sandbars, resting slots, or narrow channels can explode fast, clashing jaws, heaving bodies, crimson water. Crocodiles give adults a respectful birth. Lions think twice unless calves stray. And yet, there is tenderness. Mothers nudge calves to breathe, nurse in the shallows, and lift their young atop their backs when waves of panic churn. Hippo society is crowded but not chaotic, until it is. A dominant bull presides over a slice of river, tolerating females, calves, and a few subordinate males who know the rules. Females form loose circles of familiarity, parking their youngsters in the calmest pockets while they surface in shifts like practiced lifeguards. Communication is rich. Low-frequency rumbles travel through water. Surface calls bounce like drum beats across the channel. Courtship and quarrels both happen in the same arena, half-submerged, explosive, short. Bulls contest with ritual swagger first, dung-flinging, gape displays, then escalate to jaw duels that can leave railroad-length scars. Calves are born into the water world, able to close nostrils and suckle underwater, guarded by mothers who will body-check intruders, boats included. It is no accident hippos cause more human deaths in Africa than any other large mammal. This is a family-first society, with a hair trigger around its nursery. Hippos are engineers as much as heavyweights. Their nightly grazing trims coarse grasses, triggering fresh growth that benefits antelope herds. Their trails carve channels that guide rain and shape floodplains. Dung ferries nutrients from land to water, feeding fish, insects, and in moderation, entire aquatic food webs. Few predators trouble adults, but calves can fall to lions or crocodiles, making vigilance a community habit. Across Africa, hippopotamuses are listed as vulnerable, pressured by habitat loss, conflict, and poaching for ivory-like teeth. In Uganda's protected waters, anti-poaching patrols and community stewardship help keep the river's heartbeat steady. In every thunderous gape and midnight march, the hippo embodies unapologetic power and collective strength, a reminder that even the gentlest-looking waters can guard a fierce, ancient will to survive. what does a savage fight look like when the heavyweight is a vegetarian? When elephants decide a rule needs enforcing, even lions reread the fine print. Meet the African elephant of East Africa's sun-baked savannas. Think Uganda's Murchison Falls and Queen Elizabeth landscapes. Largest land mammal on Earth, it carries wisdom in its walk and power in every line. A trunk that is a toolkit and tusks that can turn dry riverbeds into drinking fountains, or a charging predator's plan into splinters. Draped in slate-gray armor, the elephant looks carved from weather and time. Wrinkled skin is not just style. It traps moisture and mud, slowing water loss and blocking sun. Those broad, flapping ears are living radiators, veined panels that shed heat in the midday furnace. Up front, ivory crescents curve from the skull, tusks that pry, lift, strip bark, dig wells, and when necessary, joust. The trunk is evolution's Swiss Army knife. Tens of thousands of muscle units weave into a hose, hand, trumpet, and snorkel all in one, delicate enough to pluck a berry, strong enough to uproot a shrub. Pillar legs end in cushioned, shock-absorbing feet that pad silently across dust. Toenails grip, and a fatty pad spreads the load, so 4 tons move like a rumor. Eyes are small, but the brain behind them is vast, tuned for memory of water, roots, and moments when the herd had to stand its ground. A day in elephant terms is a landscape-sized errand list. Strictly herbivorous, an adult can eat 150 to 200 kilograms of vegetation in a single day. Grass in the wet months, bark, roots, and branches when the menu gets tougher, reshaping the savanna with every mouthful. They are tireless walkers, tracing familiar highways to water and new growth. In the dry season, resourcefulness turns heroic. Using tusks and those shovel-sure feet, they dig into dry riverbeds to tap the groundwater beneath, turning dust into lifelines. These pop-up wells start with elephants, but soon serve zebras, antelope, and birds desperate for a sip. Dust baths and mud wallows are spa days with a purpose, parasite control and sunscreen in one gloopy layer. And when trouble sniffs around, the mood changes. A bluff charge becomes a real one, tusks low, ears wide, trumpets splitting the heat. Most predators read the message. Even lions prefer easier math than an angry matriarch plus a united wall of bodies. Elephant society is family first, last, and always. A seasoned matriarch leads. Her memory the library that keeps everyone alive, where water lies hidden, which corridors are safe, where danger once waited in the grass. Around her, mothers, aunts, and teenagers form a moving classroom, with calves in the safest center. Knowledge passes quietly, nudges, rumbles, the slow choreography of a herd deciding together. When threatened, the formation is instant, a protective circle around the young, adults facing outward, tusks ready. That unity alone can push lions to retreat. Bulls live differently, often solitary or in bachelor groups, drifting at the herd's edges. When they contest, the fights are raw. Physics, forehead shoves, tusk parries, dust exploding under grinding feet until one yields. There is tenderness too, calves comforted by low-frequency purrs, trunks exploring the world like curious hands, greetings that feel like hugs made of air. Elephants are the savanna's architects. By toppling trees and snapping branches, they open the canopy to sunlight, triggering flushes of fresh grasses that feed zebras, wildebeest, and gazelles. Their long-distance travels stitch habitats together, and their dung, seed-studded and nutrient-rich, plants tomorrow's groves while feeding beetles and boosting soils. Wells dug in dry riverbeds keep entire neighborhoods alive when water vanishes. Their presence shapes predator behavior, herbivore movement, and even the contours of woodlands and grasslands, a living force of ecological design. In every protective circle and thunderous charge, the elephant reminds us that true strength is protective, not reckless. It embodies memory, leadership, and the fierce grace of a giant that fights so others can live. What happens when strategy meets a sledgehammer? On Uganda's savannas, the lion's smartest plays collide with the Cape buffalo's brute force, and the grass becomes a chessboard with horns. Meet the African lion of Uganda's sweeping plains, from Queen Elizabeth to Murchison's river-washed grasslands. Tawny and muscled, with males crowned in storm-colored manes and lionesses sleek as golden shadows, this cat turns teamwork into an art form. Painted in sun-baked gold, the lion's coat is camouflage stitched by the savanna itself. Males wear manes ranging from pale wheat to smoky charcoal, status symbols that also blunt blows and horns in the heat of combat. Broad heads house bone-cracking jaws. Canines like ivory daggers punch through hide, while a bite force and suffocating grip end battles fast. Their claws are evolution's switchblades, retractable and razor-sharp, sliding out only when the moment demands. Thick paw pads muffle footfalls, so a 400-pound predator moves like a rumor in tall grass. Night grit eyes, boosted by a reflective tapetum, gather every scrap of starlight, turning dusk and dawn into hunting hours. A long, muscular tail, tipped with a black tuft, works like a steering cable in chases and a signal flag between pride mates. Even the whisker spots are a lion's fingerprint, mapping individuality in a world that demands both stealth and identity. Lions are masters of the slow burn. They nap with royal dedication up to 20 hours, then flip the switch at twilight. Lionesses lead the hunt, sweeping forward in a crescent formation, each cat reading the others with tiny flicks of ears and tail. Against antelope, they slide within striking distance and explode. Against buffalo, it is a different syllabus. They probe the herd's edges, test reactions, and search for a lapse, a calf momentarily exposed, a bull distracted, a lagging cow. The attack is both physical and psychological. Pressure applied until the chosen target separates. One lion anchors the hindquarters, another shoots for the muzzle or throat, where breath is life. The savannah trembles under buffalo hooves, and one wrong angle can send a lion skyward on a pair of hooked horns. Between hunts, they patrol, roar to announce ownership, scent mark thorny borders, and gather at waterholes where crocodiles lurk, and wind carries every rumor. Meals are messy democracies. Dominant eaters first, cubs squeezed in by pleading faces and shameless persistence. A pride is a family enterprise, related lionesses, cubs tumbling like ginger marbles, and a coalition of males, sometimes brothers, holding the domain. Lionesses run the logistics, synchronize births, and practice alloparenting, nursing and babysitting each other's young. Greetings are tender, head rubs, low grumbles, a braid of tails before the work begins. Males are the bouncers. They repel rivals, face down hyena mobs, and throw their weight into buffalo takedowns when the odds demand it. Takeovers are dramatic. New males risk everything to claim a pride, while resident males fight with a fury that echoes for miles. Cubs learn by shadowing, stalking grasshoppers, copying crouches, and later, watching buffalo drills that could fill a gladiator school. It is a soap opera with claws, but the script is survival. As apex predators, lions sculpt the savannah's balance. They cull the slow shape herbivore behavior with a landscape of fear and feed legions, hyenas, jackals, vultures on the leavings of their kills. Their cooperative hunting is a rare big cat adaptation, letting them challenge mega herbivores like buffalo and rewrite what is possible in open country. Yet they are vulnerable, shrinking habitats, human-wildlife conflict, snaring, and disease. The species is listed as vulnerable. In Uganda's protected areas, community-led conservation and anti-poaching patrols are the quiet heroes. In the thunder between lion and buffalo, we witness more than violence. We see strategy, family, and courage braided into one heartbeat. The lion embodies collective strength, a reminder that even in the fiercest fights, unity is power. No roar, no drum roll, just a soft click of claws on bark, and the fight is over before the grass remembers to sway. Meet the African leopard of Uganda's savannas and woodlands, from the fig-fringed tracks of Queen Elizabeth to the riverine shadows of Murchison and Kadipo. Sleek, solitary, and rosette-cloaked, it turns invisibility into its sharpest weapon and trees into private dining rooms. This cat is stealth stitched in gold. A slender, muscular body wears a coat of sunlit amber scattered with black rosettes, nature's pixelation that dissolves the leopard into leaf and shadow. Wide, padded paws erase footsteps. Retractable claws stay razor-keen for climbing, and that final, vice-like grip. The tail is a balancing pole, long and expressive, steadying roof-to-branch sprints and tight mid-air twists. Forward-facing eyes, turbocharged by a reflective tapetum, gulp down starlight. Ears swivel to catch the tiniest wing flick. Whiskers map thorny spaces like radar. The skull is compact and powerful, short jaws built to clamp a throat or nape with clinical precision. And then there are the shoulders, overbuilt winches of muscle designed for the showstopper, deadlifting a carcass heavier than the cat and hauling it into a forked branch where lions and hyenas can only glare from below. Every line says the same thing. Get close, strike clean, vanish upward. The leopard's savagery is strategy. It hunts alone, leaning on patience so profound it feels like a superpower, lying low for an hour, reading wind and routine, inching forward only when a head drops or a hoof hesitates. Most action unfurls at night or in the cool edges of dawn and dusk. The approach is a slow equation, grass to termite mound to gully, until distance collapses and speed detonates. Two or three bounds, a suffocating hold, and quiet returns. Often the prey is smaller than the cat, bushbuck fawns, monkeys, birds, hares, not because it cannot do bigger, but because safe bets pay best in a dangerous neighborhood. Then comes the signature move: drag, climb, cache. By hoisting dinner skyward, the leopard avoids ground brawls with hyenas and lions. The savage fights it refuses to lose by never showing up. Diet is flexible by design. Young antelopes, monkeys, birds, reptiles, whatever the season and shadows allow. In a world where resources flicker, adjustment is the daily ritual. Privacy is policy. Adults live alone, their home ranges overlapping like polite whispers instead of lines drawn in stone, males skimming the edges of several females' territories. They negotiate with scent marks, scratch posts, and a rasping, saw-like call that threads through the dark. Courtship is brief, then secrecy takes over. After roughly 3 months, a female tucks 1 to 3 cubs into a hidden den. Rock crevice, thicket, hollow log, shifting sights often to outsmart curious noses. She is hunter, teacher, and bodyguard, ferrying meat to cover and running tiny stalking drills that grow into real lessons. Cubs face a hard syllabus. Hyenas, lions, and snares all grade harshly. Adults dodge open conflict whenever possible, but corner a leopard and you will meet a blur of claws and muscle that convinces trouble to reconsider. As adaptable ambush predators, leopards prune small and mid-sized herbivores and primates, shaping when and where grazing and browsing happen. Their tree-cached kills fuel a second wave of life. Genets, civets, eagles, hyenas, recycling nutrients from canopy to soil. Flexibility is their edge. Broad diet, stealth, and vertical escape routes keep them thriving when specialists stumble. Yet threats bite back. Habitat loss, wire snares, livestock conflict, and illegal trade. Listed as vulnerable, leopards in Uganda lean on protected areas, anti-poaching patrols, and community stewardship to keep those rosettes moving through the dusk. In a world that celebrates loud battles, the leopard wins by never raising its voice. It embodies the art of precise ferocity, a reminder that sometimes the fiercest fight is a whisper followed by silence. The river does not roar. It whispers, then detonates. In Uganda's still waters, calm can flip to chaos in a heartbeat when a Nile crocodile decides the fight has already been won. Meet the Nile crocodile of Uganda's White Nile and mirror-still lakes, an ambush specialist wrapped in armor. With jaws capable of nearly 5,000 pounds per square inch, this reptile wins by patience, not by sprinting. Sculpted by evolution into a living spear, the Nile crocodile wears a suit of olive-brown scales studded with bony plates called osteoderms, natural chain mail that shrugs off kicks, claws, and desperate last scrambles. Its eyes, nostrils, and ears ride the top of the skull like periscopes, letting the rest of the body vanish beneath the surface. A nictitating membrane slides over each eye like a built-in swimming goggle, and a palatal valve seals the throat so it can drag prey underwater without drowning itself. The tail is a ridged engine, propelling sudden bursts from a motionless drift. Webbed feet fine-tune the approach. Along the jaws, tiny sensory pits read ripples the way a seismograph reads earthquakes. One footfall on the bank can be a dinner bell. Heat is no problem. Open mouth gaping cools the blood, while that thick, pebbled hide resists sun and abrasion. Big males can stretch beyond 5 meters, but it is the illusion of smallness, just a log in the reeds, that makes them lethal. Their superpower is stillness. A crocodile can hold at the water's edge for hours or even days. letting antelopes lower their guards, zebras step a little closer, and warthogs forget how short life can be. It studies shadows, wind, and the rhythm of a herd, then chooses the crossing point where panic has no exits. The strike is a piston, a vertical surge, jaws slam shut, and the victim disappears in a hail of spray. Against large prey, the crocodile employs the infamous death roll, spinning with violent torque to tear, disorient, and end resistance fast. These reptiles are energy accountants, basking during the hottest hours, hunting at dusk or night, and living on a slow, burning metabolism that can stretch one big meal for weeks. They can stay submerged for long minutes, lungs calm, heart rate down, waiting for a mistake. Fights with buffalo or even lions at the water's edge are brief and brutal. One wrong step, and the river owns the outcome. Crocodiles are not team hunters, but they are not hermits either. On prime banks, they gather like armored sunbathers, where quiet hierarchies rule who gets the best basking spot or first bite of a carcass. Big males defend short stretches of river, advertising with deep bellows that thrum through water and bone. Courtship is a low rumble ballet of nudges and bubble displays, and females become fierce when it counts. They bury eggs in warm sand and stand guard, jaws ready. Time comes, hatchlings chirp from inside the eggs. The mother answers by gently digging them out and ferrying them to the shallows in her mouth, a tender image from a feared predator. Some females form creches, corralling dozens of tiny, toothy noodles in sheltered nurseries. Hippos share the same stage. Adults get a hard pass, but a crocodile will test a calf if the guardians falter. Most days, caution wins. On this river, veterans live long by not being foolish. As apex predators and expert scavengers, Nile crocodiles regulate who drinks where and when, shaping the choreography of the riverbank. They transport nutrients from water to land and back again, feeding hyenas, marabou storks, and fish with their leftovers. Their sensory pits detect vibrations, and their slow metabolism, armor, and amphibious lifestyle make them drought-resistant survivors. Globally listed as of least concern, local threats, entanglement in nets, habitat loss, egg harvesting, and conflict can bite deep. In Uganda's protected waters, patrols and community programs keep this ancient balance breathing. In the silence before the strike, the crocodile is time itself, old, patient, unblinking. It embodies the river's truth, the savagery of survival wrapped in perfect, disciplined calm. Grace can be gentle until it is not. When a giraffe decides to fight, a 6-foot neck turns into a swinging mace, and a single front kick can rewrite a lion's afternoon. Meet the Rothschild's giraffe, a towering resident of the savannah, whose long legs and long neck, patterned in creamy-edged patches, make it one of nature's most majestic sights. Its height grants a private buffet above the crowd, treetop leaves unreachable to other herbivores, and eyes that survey danger long before it arrives. Painted in warm chestnut blocks outlined by pale lines, with pale stocking legs below the knees, the Rothschild's giraffe looks like sunlight broken into puzzle pieces. Males often carry extra ossicones, bony knobs on the skull that act like built-in helmets when arguments escalate. A prehensile, dark tongue nearly half a meter long threads through acacia thorns, while tough lips and a leather-hard palate shrug off spines most mouths fear. Inside, the engineering is audacious. A huge heart drives high blood pressure up that impossible neck, while valves and a sponge like rete mirabile protect the brain when the head dips to drink. Dinner plate hooves steady those telescoping legs. A tail with a tassel swats flies with lazy precision. High-set eyes and rotating ears make a panoramic early warning system. And when elegance needs teeth, the forelegs become hammers, front kicks thrown with shocking speed and accuracy, perfectly capable of breaking a jaw or turning a charge. Life at altitude moves in calm, deliberate loops. The giraffe grazes the sky, browsing treetop foliage for hours, then standing to ruminate like a living watchtower. It feeds mostly in the cool of morning and late afternoon, drifting across large ranges to map the shifting menu. Pods here, new leaf flush there, adapting to different vegetation as seasons turn. Water is the risky chapter. To drink, it must splay or kneel, head lowered and vulnerable, so it pauses, listens, and rockets upright at the smallest wrong ripple. Predators know to test the young or isolate the old. Healthy adults are another story. If threatened, a giraffe squares its stance and fires front kicks that can end the debate in one blow. Bulls add a different kind of savage spectacle. Necking bouts where they stand side by side and swing those heavy skulls like wrecking balls, thudding neck into neck until one yields. Between storms, the day softens. Soft snorts, slow strides, shade, and the metronome of chewing as the savannah breathes around them. Think fission-fusion fluidity. Cows and calves drift in loose, changeable groups, joining and parting as food and comfort dictate. Calves often gather in creches watched by a few vigilant mothers, while others browse nearby. Bulls cruise solo or cluster in bachelor bands, shadowing female groups when courtship stirs. Dominance is settled more by physics than fury. Necking starts as measured sparring and can escalate to bone-on-bone hooks to the ribs or flanks. Winners gain better access to receptive females. Losers wander off with their dignity dented but rarely destroyed. Mothers are steadfast guardians, positioning calves on the lee side of their bodies, and when needed, stamping a circle of confidence around their young. No one here defends strict territory. Ranges overlap like gentle brushstrokes across the grass. Rothschild's giraffes are canopy gardeners. By pruning high branches, they stimulate fresh growth, let light flood to grasses below, and ferry seeds across distances in a tall, loping commute. Their constant movement knits habitats together. Their vigilance is a public service. Zebras and antelopes often feed nearby, trusting that high vantage. Calves and weakened adults feed lions and hyenas, returning nutrients to the system they help shape. Habitat loss, wire snares, and conflict beyond park edges remain threats, though translocations and protected areas have helped numbers rebound in parts of their range. The giraffe is elegance with a hidden edge, a reminder that height, strength, and alertness can turn serenity into sudden power. It embodies the savanna's quiet law: be gentle with the leaves and fierce when the wild comes calling. Ever seen courage with a mohawk and a mustache? When a warthog gets cornered, the savanna suddenly sprouts sharp opinions and a pair of tusks that mean business. Meet the African warthog of Uganda's sun-baked plains and light woodlands, from Murchison Falls to Kadipo's wind-scoured grass. Stocky, scarred, and surprisingly quick, this pig wears its battles on its face and keeps its confidence in the ground beneath its hooves. Sculpted like a compact bulldozer, the warthog carries dark, leathery skin and a scruff of coarse bristles that stand up in a punky mane when excitement crackles. Those warts are not blemishes at all, but thick pads of skin, cheek shields that cushion blows during head-to-head tussles. Curved upper tusks arc like crescents, but it is the shorter, razor-edged lower tusks that do the cutting, slashing sideways with nasty precision. A flat, muscular snout ends in a tough, digging disc, perfect for plowing into baked earth after roots and bulbs. The front knees wear calloused pads. Warthogs kneel to graze, a quirky, energy-saving posture that looks like a bow, but functions like a lawnmower. Sparse hair helps shed heat, while dark skin resists sun and thorns. Wide-set eyes, swiveling ears, and a high head carriage keep the horizon surveyed. When it is time to go, that skinny tail pops upright like a radio antenna, an all-aboard flag for a fast zigzag exit. daylight suits them. Warthogs spend mornings and late afternoons foraging, then rest through the hottest hours near shade or burrow mouths. They are opportunists with a menu of tough grasses, tubers, fallen fruit, and juicy extras like grubs, anything the snout can locate and the hooves can unearth. Digging doubles as engineering. They open and tidy old aardvark burrows, then reverse park into them at night, tusks pointed out like a doorman who lifts weights. Predators rewrite the schedule. At the hint of lion or hyena, a sounder bolts in single file, tails aloft for visibility in tall grass. If escape routes pinch shut, a warthog can pivot from comedian to gladiator, charging low, slashing with those under tusks, and shrieking with the kind of clarity that makes even a leopard blink. Most fights are brief, all footwork and timing. Victory is measured in meters gained, not trophies claimed. Dust baths cool skin and eject parasites, and a good wallow is both spa day and scent marker, warthog cologne, eau de mud. Community here is practical. Females form tight-knit sounders with their piglets, sharing vigilance and sometimes babysitting duties in creches at safe burrow sites. They communicate in grunts, snorts, and tail talk, shifting formation the moment danger whispers. Boars often live alone or in loose bachelor groups, swinging by when mating season stirs the air. Male-male contests are armored fencing matches, head shoves, tusk parries, and sidesteps, where those facial warts pay their dues. Gestation runs about 5 to 6 months. Litters of 2 to 4 emerge striped and swift, born into a world where standing up fast is lesson 1. Mothers are fierce but pragmatic, moving burrows when predators map their routines and teaching piglets the art of kneel grazing, quick dashes, and knowing when a fight is worth it. Warthogs are the plumbers and plows of the savannah. Their digging aerates soil, plants seeds, and invites rain into hardpan. Their grazing trims coarse grasses, so tender regrowth feeds antelope lines behind them. Old burrows become life support for mongooses, jackals, and even owls. They are also key prey for lions, leopards, and hyenas, fuel for the food web they help maintain. Listed as of least concern on paper, they still run the gauntlet of snares, habitat squeeze, and disease. In Uganda's parks, anti-poaching patrols and community stewardship let this tough little engineer keep punching above its weight. In a land that worships speed and size, the warthog is a reminder that grit, wit, and a good exit strategy can win the day. It embodies the spirit of scrappy survival, unpretty, unpretentious, and unstoppable when it matters. What does a savage fight look like? when your weapons are air and geometry. Watch an impala turn a lion's ambush into a blur of leaps, pivots, and pure physics. Meet the impala of Uganda's acacia-dotted savannas, especially around Lake Mburo, where the grass runs gold and the wind carries rumors. Sleek, copper tan, and shockingly spring-loaded, this antelope is defined by split-second decisions and gravity-defying escapes. Painted in warm cinnamon with a clean white belly and charcoal accents, the impala looks like elegance sketched in motion. A black line stripes the tail, and twin black tufts sit on the ankles, metatarsal scent glands that leave breadcrumbs of identity as herds flow through the grass. Only males carry horns, ridged lyre-shaped crescents that sweep back and up, agile levers for wrestling rivals. Long, elastic legs house coil spring tendons. Slim, shock-absorbing hooves bite into dusty ground, then release like catapults. In a chase, an adult can burst toward 80 kilometers per hour, leap 3 meters high, and clear 10 meters in a single bound, parkour written by evolution. Huge, liquid brown eyes set wide on the skull grant nearly panoramic vision, while big, swiveling ears vacuum up the savanna's gossip, paws in the grass, a wing flick, the hush before trouble. Inside, a ruminant's 4-chambered stomach and sharp-edged teeth handle a mixed menu of grasses and tender leaves, letting the impala switch diets with the season and stay light, fast, and fueled. Impalas are daytime dancers with crepuscular flair. They graze at dawn, browse in shade when the heat tightens its grip, then return to the buffet as the light softens. Water is important, but not constant. These antelopes stretch hydration by drawing moisture from green plants when pools shrink. The fight they are famous for is chess against carnivores. At the first snort of danger, the herd compresses, then detonates, stotting high, swerving hard, threading bushes at full tilt. Those bouncing leaps are not panic, they are strategy, forcing lions, leopards, and wild dogs to recalculate speed and angle with every heartbeat. Impalas shout their alarms in explosive snorts and sniffs, sometimes stamping forefeet like punctuation. Between alarms, it is ritual and maintenance, mutual grooming to evict ticks, dust bathing in shallow pans, and quiet foraging lines that ribbon across the plain. Strength, for impalas, is spelled together. Most females travel in herds with their young, a living kaleidoscope that trades eyes and ears for safety. Nearby, bachelor groups practice sparring and patience. When the rains tease the grass alive, males flip a switch. They carve territories along travel corridors and water, scent mark with preorbital glands, and advertise with sawing grunts that sound like a motorcycle starting badly. Then come the savage bits, horn clashes, neck wrestling, hook and twist maneuvers, and high-speed chases that leave shoulders scarred and egos adjusted. Victors collect temporary harems, herding females and shouldering rivals off invisible borders. Calves often arrive in a synchronized pulse. Newborns hide for days in cover before joining a nursery of peers, guarded by mothers who can turn on a dime and put a leopard in the wrong patch of air. Impalas are the hinge in the savanna's door. By switching between grazing and browsing, they even out pressure on plants and help maintain a mosaic of grass and shrubs. They move seeds, feed oxpeckers and other tick pickers, and tough truth, fuel lions, leopards, cheetahs, and wild dogs, converting grass and leaves into predator energy. Their nimble, herd-based vigilance shapes where carnivores hunt and when. Globally, they are listed as of least concern, but snares, fencing, and habitat squeeze can turn a good year into a bad one fast. In Uganda's protected areas, rangers and community programs help keep the herds unbroken and the leaps unbroken too. In every impossible jump and razor-turn escape, the Impala proves that grace can be a kind of ferocity. It embodies resilience, the elegant refusal to be easy prey in a world that never stops testing you. When speed puts on a helmet, you get a fight like a thunderclap. Two sets of curved horns meet, dust flies, and the topi writes exclamation marks across the savannah. Meet the topi, an alcelephine antelope of East Africa's open plains, including Uganda's grasslands. Often confused with its cousin, the hartebeest, the topi is its own athlete. Reddish-brown sheen, blackened socks, and sturdy, ridged horns that curve like question marks turned into answers. Nature dressed the topi in copper and shadow. The coat glows reddish-brown, with inky patches on the face, thighs, and upper legs that look almost metallic in the right light. Males are slightly larger and more muscular, but both sexes carry heavy, ringed horns, shorter than a hartebeest's, but thick and deadly, curving backward and up for leverage during head-to-head bouts. The body shows a runner's blueprint. Long, springy legs, a deep chest for efficient oxygen flow, and a slightly sloped back that keeps the shoulders high and ready. Slender hooves bite into firm ground for sudden pivots. Broad nasal passages cool hot air when sprinting. Big, laterally placed eyes watch nearly all around at once, and those ears flick like satellite dishes when the wind shifts. Topi are built to stay lean and mobile, turning sparse grass into fuel, distance into safety, and horns into tools of both status and survival. Topis are sunrise strategists and twilight commuters. They graze primarily on scattered, short grasses, picking the freshest, greenest blades with almost snobbish precision. Open country is their comfort zone, great for spotting trouble, terrible for hiding, so they mix vigilance with velocity. A favorite trick is to mount termite mounds and scan, taking turns like practiced sentinels. When danger stirs, a lion flattening in the grass, a cheetah ghosting the horizon, the herd compresses, then unwinds into a fast zigzag sprint that can touch 70 kilometers per hour. They dive for denser cover if it is near, but their best shelter is usually space and speed. Dry seasons test their planning. Topi travel long distances to track patches of green and hit water when they must, timing feeding for cooler hours and resting through the heat. And the savage fights, bulls turn calm mornings into gladiator sessions, snorting, pawing, raking horns through grass, then slamming head to head with bone-jarring cracks that echo across the plain. Teamwork is policy. Hierarchy is punctuation. Topis form small family groups or medium-sized herds with a living shield wall, vulnerable animals in the center, seasoned adults on the edges. During breeding peaks, males take up territories along travel routes or gather in leks, each bull advertising with stance, scent, and stamina. Challenges begin with posture, head low, horns forward, shoulders rolling. Then come the collisions, horn wrestling, shoves, and clever sidesteps. Many fights are ritual, designed to decide without ruin. Others turn rough fast when rivals refuse to yield. Females move between territories, choosing not just the grass, but the guardians. Calving often pulses with the seasons. Mothers hide newborns for the first days, then fold them into the herd's protective geometry. Communication is constant, snorts, tail flicks, and that classic topi. Stare from a mound that says, "We have seen you. Do not try it." As precision grazers, topi keep grasslands trimmed, encouraging fresh, nutrient-rich growth that benefits a parade of neighbors, zebras, gazelles, and even insect swarms. Their movements shuttle seeds and nutrients across big distances. Their vigilance serves as a public alarm for mixed herds. They are crucial prey for lions, cheetahs, hyenas, and wild dogs, converting grass into the energy that powers predators. Topi are generally listed as of least concern, but fences, snares, and shrinking ranges can squeeze them hard. Protected areas and community-managed corridors keep their roads to food and water open, and the savanna's engine humming. The topi is grace with grit, alert eyes, quick feet, and the nerve to stand and fight when it counts. It embodies the savanna's rulebook. Move smart, watch hard, and when the dust rises, meet it with courage and curved horns. Who says herbivores do not hit back? When a zebra decides no, even lions remember their appointments elsewhere. Meet the plains zebra of Uganda's Lake Mboro and Kadipo Valley, sleek black and white thunder with hooves that can shatter a predator's plans. Its stripes are not just fashion, they are a moving mirage that turns a hunt into guesswork. Painted by nature in bold barcodes, each zebra's stripe pattern is a one-of-a-kind signature, identity cards etched in light and shadow. The contrast is not only for show. Against shimmering heat and tall grass, those lines disrupt outlines, blending bodies into a flickering wall when the herd runs. Studies suggest stripes also baffle biting flies and may help regulate heat by creating tiny convection currents along the skin. Beneath the pattern is power. A compact torso, slabbed with muscle, drives a sprint near 65 kilometers per hour and a kick that can bruise bone and dent pride. High-crowned teeth grind silica-laced grasses, and a hindgut fermentation system turns coarse, fibrous forage into fuel, an edge when the menu gets thin. Big swiveling ears catch trouble long before it arrives. Wide-set eyes watch nearly all directions at once, and tough, narrow hooves bite into baked ground. Even the dark muzzle and broomtail have jobs, pruning sharp blades and swatting persistent parasites in a land that never stops testing them. Zebras are daylight commuters of the plains, grazing in loose files that ribbon across grasslands. They are endurance feeders, cropping tough stems. Other herbivores snub, then marching to water where hippos snort and crocodiles wait with antique patience. Dry seasons push them farther, and their timing becomes everything. Drink quickly, leave together, trust the perimeter watchers. When predators probe, chaos becomes choreography. The herd tightens, faces shift outward, foals slide to the middle. If a charge comes, they zigzag, pivot, and explode, dust, legs, and stripes turning the view into static. A cornered zebra does not fold. It spins and fires backward, kicks like pistons, bites low at a hunter's legs, and may drop to its knees to strike with both hind hooves at once. Stallions act like bouncers, slashing with incisors and charging hyenas to break a surround. Between crises, life is ritual, dust baths, nose-to-nose greetings, and that unmistakable bark bray that carries across the plain, part roll call, part rumor mill. Strength here is spelled family. Most zebras travel as tight-knit harems, a dominant stallion, several mares, and their foals, shadowed by bachelor bands waiting for their promotion. The stallion sets the tempo, steers to water, and stands between danger and the core. But mares are the anchors, synchronizing movements and nursing the next generation of stripes. Foals stand within minutes of birth, legs wobbly, eyes locked on their mother's unique pattern like a living password. Affection is practical. Mutual grooming untangles manes and cements bonds. Alarm calls are instant group messages. When rival stallions collide, the fights can be savage, rearing, neck wrestling, biting flanks and knees, screams slicing the heat, because the prize is a family and the future. In predator rushes, adults wheel into a living shield, presenting hooves and teeth, shifting as one so no single back is exposed. Unity is not optional, it is armor. Zebras are lawnmowers with a landscape plan. Cropping coarse grasses first, they open fresh growth for more selective grazers, topi, cob, and gazelles, setting a meal train in motion. They haul seeds across distances, fertilize the soil, and yes, feed the food web as vital prey for lions, hyenas, and wild dogs. Their stripes may reduce biting fly loads, indirectly lowering disease risks across herds. Plains zebras are globally near threatened. Habitat loss, fencing, snaring, and competition with livestock chip away at numbers. In Uganda's parks, rangers and communities hold the line so the stripes keep moving. In every blur of black and white, the zebra reminds us that defense can be beautiful, and that courage, choreographed as a herd, is its own kind of fight song across the savannah. Forget sprint and spectacle. This is power on a slow burn. When eland bulls lower their horns and that tendon click starts sounding like a metronome, the savannah knows a serious argument is about to begin. Meet the common eland, East Africa's largest antelope, roaming Uganda's Kadipo Valley and Pianupe Plains. Towering, tan, and calm-eyed, it is instantly recognized by a pendulous dewlap and long, gently spiraled horns that promise quiet strength with a sting. Painted in warm fawn with a white underbelly and, in many individuals, faint chalk stripes along the flanks, the eland looks as if it has been dusted by the horizon. A black tufted tail, dark leg markings, and a beard-like throat fringe frame that broad chest and massive shoulders. Both sexes carry horns, thick, slightly twisted lances that grow longer on females and heavier on males, used as levers in wrestling bouts and as spears when something toothy makes a bad decision. The big, hanging dewlap is not decoration. It increases surface area for heat loss, a natural radiator for midday scorch. Beneath the skin, an elite rumen setup breaks down tough, dry browse that defeats fussier eaters, and high-crowned teeth chew through pods, leaves, and twiggy fare without complaint. Splayed, rubbery hooves grip rocky slopes. Dense muscle gives startling spring for an animal this size, And yes, those knee tendons really do click as they walk, a wooden knock soundtrack that can carry across open ground. In a landscape where water vanishes, the eland's physiology leans cool and efficient, able to stretch hydration and harvest moisture from food. Elands do not rush the day, they manage it. Dawn is for feeding, midday for shade and rumination, dusk for another round of foraging before predators clock in. In the dry months, when grass crisps to straw and pans shrink, they push farther between browse patches and water points, endurance travel that mirrors the impala's long-distance strategy, but at a measured, economical gait. Being tall pays. They pluck leaves and seed pods above zebra height, tongue and lips working like gentle forceps. Their fights are more boardroom than bar brawl. Ritual first, violence second. Bulls parade with head high, dewlaps swinging, horns tilted to flaunt size. Then come hornlocks, shoves, and measured feints. But if lions or hyenas test them, the tempo changes. A cow will wheel with her calf behind her hips. A bull will drive a charge low and decisive. And a circle of eland, horns outward, can turn a hunt into a regret. When the sun hits hard, they loaf in sparse shade, chew cud, and let those heat-dumping dewlaps and pale coats keep the core cool. This is a society of small circles. Females travel in modest family groups with their calves, drifting together for safety and splitting to feed where the shrubs are richest. Calves may form loose nurseries, while mothers rotate guard and grazing duties. Adult bulls are often solitary or in relaxed bachelor bands, shadowing the female groups when breeding scent hangs in the air. Territory is more suggestion than law. Eland follow resources rather than defend hard borders. Communication is understated, body posture, horn display, a hush of grunts, and of course, that signature knee click, which may broadcast size and confidence without wasting breath. When bulls contest, the aim is to decide, not destroy. Horn-to-horn wrestling, pushing matches, and slow, grinding tests of stamina, where the dewlap doubles as a padded bumper. Mothers are steady protectors, leading calves into broken, rocky ground, where lion speed turns clumsy, and an ambush becomes a puzzle. As tall browsers, eland prune trees, and shrubs that would otherwise choke grasslands, opening space for grazers and letting sunlight refuel the green engine. They disperse seeds in their travels, ferry nutrients through dung, and as large herbivores, shape where predators patrol and when. Their heat tolerance and ability to live on dry, fibrous diets keep the herbivore guild functioning through harsh seasons. Globally, common eland are listed as of least concern, but local pressures, snaring, habitat loss, and competition with livestock can chip away at numbers. Protected areas in Uganda give them room to roam, and community-led conservation keeps those quiet giants part of the landscape. The eland's battles are not always loud, but they are relentless. It embodies endurance over flash and resolve over panic. A reminder that in the savannah's harshest seasons, calm, patient strength can be the fiercest fight of all. Dusk folds over Uganda's rolling savannas, and the first stars prick the sky above the shadowed forests. Heat loosens, wind turns the grass into a silver river. At the edge of a floodplain, everything converges: thirst, hunger, and that old law the wild never repeals. Elephants arrive in a silent column, the matriarch reading the air like a map. Buffalo mass into a dark, breathing wall. Uganda cob step lightly, ears high. Topi mount a termite mound and stare hard into the wind. Hippos grunt from a backwater like bouncers on break. A fish eagle screams from a snag. In the shallows, one log is not a log, crocodile. The night crew moves. Lions flatten into tawny commas, tails flicking. Hyenas surf the edges, already counting futures. A cob edges down to drink. The water erupts, jaws, spray, chaos. The cob pivots, hooves carving mud, and somehow wins back its feet. The crocodile slides under, patience reset. Across the flats, a young buffalo drifts too far from the herd. The grass explodes, lionesses clamp, dust blooms, the plain fills with a sound older than stories. The herd wheels. Bulls drop their heads and charge like an avalanche with horns. A lion sails, a second spins away with a raking blow. In the crush, the calf finds the living tunnel back to safety. The pride pulls off, breath hot, ribs ticking like metronomes. Tonight, hunger keeps its lesson. Trumpets tear the dark. The elephant matriarch steps forward, ears like storm clouds. Lions fade. Hyenas melt, calves sip. Mud turns to quiet music under heavy feet. The waterhole becomes a truce zone because she says so. Not every fight is a kill. Some are standoffs that redraw the map for a night. Some are rescues. Some are warnings carried on dust and moonlight. And in every clash, elephants guarding, lions testing, buffalo holding the line, cob and topi threading the margins. Other remarkable species keep the balance intact. The architects, the sentinels, the opportunists, all pieces of one living equation. We have crossed open plains and wandered forest edges together, watched majesty move and teeth decide, and felt how fragile and resilient this system is at the same time. Our role is to keep the rhythm unbroken, keep corridors open, back the rangers and communities who make sure a snare never becomes the end of a story. If this journey moved you, tap like, subscribe, And tell us in the comments which showdown stunned you most and where you are watching from. Share this with a friend who knows the sound of a fish eagle at dusk. Although our episode ends here, the wild does not. Its stories, struggles, and triumphs keep breathing into every Ugandan sunrise. The journey into the heart of the untamed has only just begun.